So the devs of Lords of the Fallen have absolutely been cooking with their updates because today they have yet again dropped us another 6 new spells into the entire game. On top of that, we also got some new unique moves for the boss weapons, which I will be going over in a later video, but for now, let's cover some of these new spells we just got and find out if they're going to be the new staple in every single wizardry build that you make, or if they're going to be mid-trash that no one will ever touch. But before we get into the rest of the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the future content related to Lords of the Fallen. Okay, anyways, getting right into the new spells, let's go over the one that I'm most excited about, and as we all know, the Frostbite status effect is pretty much mid, and on top of that, we only had like one ice spell in the game, so making an ice build in general was just not going to happen. But finally, with this update, the devs decided to give us 2 new ice spells which both look pretty promising, but the one that looks super OP is called Hibernal Cleave. And funny enough with this spell, it's kind of a copy and paste of the Seismic Slam fire spell, you know, the one where you pull out a hammer and smash the ground, sending forth a wave of flames that do some pretty insane damage. But with Hibernal Cleave, instead of fire, it's all revolved around ice, shooting forth a bunch of ice spikes, also doing a ton of damage, and even applying wither damage to your opponent's health bar. And this spell does some pretty insane damage just like the Seismic Slam. You can take out bosses no problem with this spell. With its huge burst damage and its pretty fast casting speed, you won't have to worry about getting killed from casting the spell a few times or 100 times. It's also great at killing mobs since it's pretty low cost in mana with only using up 66 a cast, so you can spam this easily going through areas and destroying those larger enemies you may be struggling with. Overall, this is definitely going to be a staple spell for anyone running any type of Umbral builds. This spell is just as broken as a Seismic Slam, just now for a different category, and in my opinion, way cooler, so I give this spell an easy 10 out of 10. Okay, going into our next spell, let's stick with that ice theme, and go over this new one called the Puncturing Hail spell. This spell summons out 3 icicles above your head, shooting out each one at a time rhythm. These little icicles actually do some pretty decent damage on each hit and have amazing tracking. On top of that, if you're fighting something or someone very aggressive, you can cast this, and as you're swinging at your opponent, the icicles will also be hitting them at the same time, just combining into a ton and tons amount of damage. The range on this spell is no joke either. These things are basically going on forever. As long as you can lock onto the enemy, these things will reach them. The only downside to the spell is that the animation itself, as it does have you stand still doing your casting, which can leave you very vulnerable if you're too close to an enemy. But luckily with their crazy range, that's not really going to be too big of a deal because you can just outrange most things without taking any damage. This spell would definitely be a staple in any of my Umbral builds in the future. Okay, so time to move away from the new Umbral spells and go with the new Radiant spells. Let's start off with the one that is called Lambent Feint. This spell makes it so you spin backwards, pulling out this sick holy bow and launching an arrow at your opponent, crashing with them and causing an impact of thorns to deal damage over time. The initial hit with his weapon does some pretty high damage, and if you hit a slow enemy or someone who stands still in the thorns, then this spell can output some pretty high damage. Its spinning animation is super satisfying, but man is it super slow to fire that projectile, so using it willy-nilly doesn't really work too well. So I couldn't see this being too useful against too many of the bosses, since a lot of them are fast and this spell can miss if anything is just moving sideways. It does have a pretty low mana cost, so spamming it is easy, but even just spamming it against regular mobs seems kinda dumb, because of how long that wind up takes. It's best to use at like the start of a fight. The second you get into a fight, you use it, and then you kind of just ignore it as you go in and do the rest of your damage. But overall, high damage, but a little bit too slow to truly be a staple. Very cool spell though, still something I'd love to use just because of how flashy it looks. The next Radiant spell we'll be going over is called the Smiting Shield, and basically you summon a shield on your arm and then you toss it at your opponent. This one's kind of weird. The damage on it is actually pretty nice, but it has this insanely slow wind-up animation that takes forever just to throw the thing out. And on top of that, the animation for the shield makes me cringe every time I see it. The shield just kind of shoots forward and doesn't spin or anything. It's just a stiff plate heat-seeking a target like something you'd see in a 1960s film where they just first attempted CGI. It's just so off-putting. Like I said before, the damage is great, but its slow-ass animation doesn't really make up worth using in bossing or even mob killing. They should have made it like a Captain America shield where it bounces between multiple enemies, then this spell would absolutely go crazy. But with its goofy look and the slow startup animation, I just can't really see myself ever actually using this. Alright, now that we're done with that goofy spell, let's talk about some Inferno spells, starting off with the Incinerating Blast. This spell charges up a fireball that you blast forward at insane speed and then blows up on impact for huge damage and even inflicting ignite buildup. And let me tell you, this spell is pretty cracked. The charge up may be kinda slow and annoying, but the damage this spell does is insane. Its slow animation makes it pretty bad to be able to spam, but you won't even need to be able to spam this with how much damage it actually does. You basically will kill most bosses in a couple of the cast anyways, and one shot is all it's gonna take to take out any of the regular mobs, so you can just run through the game destroying everyone with this spell. The other only downside to it besides that super slow startup is its range isn't too crazy. It's like a medium range spell, so people may be able to run up on you pretty fast before this spell comes out. But if it does actually get the chance to fire before they hit you, they're 100% dead. This spell goes so hard and is definitely something I'm going to be using in my future Infernal builds. Alright, now going into the final spell, which is called Seared Soul. This spell is really funny because you basically spawn in a suicide bomber to kill themselves in the name of your glory. But, this is definitely more of a meme spell. You cast it out pretty fast, but then it has this whole summoning animation that takes it a while to get out, and then it has to slowly run towards the target, so it's kind of meh. The damage on it is actually pretty awesome, really high for what it is, but you could also just use something else that instantly gets out the same amount of damage, so it's just kind of funny to summon something, and as you're fighting your opponent, a little fella comes along behind him and then blows himself up. Besides that, there's not much to really say on this spell. High damage, and it's pretty funny, but it can't really be used for mob killing because it just takes way too long to run over to them. And bossing is like, okay I guess, just to have a secondary dude to do some damage for you for a second as you're attacking the boss, it's okay. Not really something I would be using seriously, only if I'm kind of just messing around. But that's going to do it for all the new spells in the game. What do you guys think about them? Are they as cool and as good as you hope for? In my opinion, I really like them all, except for the shield throw. Just because of that super goofy animation. I love the concept, but man, you guys gotta fix that stiff plate just heat-seeking people. It's super weird. But anyways, that's going to do it for me, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.